It's a real pleasure to be able to introduce these ideas that surround frequency medicine and the idea of interdimensional health. We are multi-dimensional beings and we are living interdimensionally. And this introduction to holosonic sound therapy hopefully will help you to understand why we're so excited about the idea of working with sound frequencies to bring health and well-being to a new level. My name is Jeffrey Montague-Smith. I'm a registered osteopath, and I just want to show you a little bit about how we can use musical tuning forks. That's really what they are. They've been developed for use in healing. And on the left there, you can see the aluminium forks. I'll go into a little bit more detail about how we work specifically with these frequencies as we go through the presentation. And on the right there, you can see the steel tuning forks, which we use for literally laser-like specific therapy. It's like surgery with sound. Really remarkable. We've developed this method over many, many years to acknowledge that we have a light body which is constructed with many different layers. You could say consciousness resides here. This is the realm of our emotions and our thought processes and the connection to the higher self from the standpoint of soul and spirit and cosmic universal connection. And the idea is that the light body really informs the cells of the material body. So if there's a disease process at the physical level, we can potentially have a positive impact by working with frequency in the field or in the light body. So we'll just do an overview today just to give you the basic ideas, and hopefully that will really inspire you to maybe take this further and come and study with us and learn more. So I enrolled in the British School of Osteopathy in 1985. It was a 4-year training. I made a very, very good friend there. His name was Mark. And the tragic gift that Mark gave to me was when we were on holiday in Ibiza, he fell from a balcony and I was with him as he died. And I saw a rainbow I saw his soul leave his body. And looking back, it was that moment that got me thinking about, what animates the physical body? Who are we? And I started looking at the meaning of life, and I started looking at metaphysical concepts. And I was very fortunate to meet some mentors that could guide me in that quest for knowledge. And the two men that stand out are Peter Goldman, who was an osteopath and naturopath, and he'd been taught by an amazing metaphysician, a man called Ronald Beasley. And Peter at that time was head of the College of Spiritual Psychotherapeutics, and he had just begun on the journey of using tuning forks and sound healing. And he and I really, over the years, have worked to really refine holosonic sound therapy and bring it into a format where it can be easily taught to not just clinicians, but also the lay person who might be interested to understand how sound can be used in a healing context. And on the right-hand side there, you can see Dr. Robert Cass, again, another naturopath. He taught me how to use electroacupuncture according to the principles of Dr. Voll, which goes back nearly 100 years. And the homeopathic and the herbal and the natural remedies that can be tested for using bioresonance. So, collecting information from the meridians as an interface between the light body and the physical body is a very useful tool. It's essential. And I guess what we can say is that putting all of this together gives us a truly interdimensional approach. So let's start by laying a few foundations. I mean, we can talk about spiritual science, and some people get a little bit nervous when we start talking about spiritual scientific study. Hopefully, you're going to be open-minded and receptive enough to at least ponder some of these ideas. and together we may be able to go on a lovely journey. So let's think about the basic principles of who am I? You know, when you ask the question, who am I? It gets really interesting because you start to have to ask, well, what animates me? What drives me? What's the living principle? What's the life force? And I guess we can say that, you know, the experiences that we've had in our lived life, you know, the past that we've gone through, have informed us. So we're anchored by what we would describe as the known. We're anchored into the past. And that's referenced by time. But equally, we're pulled towards the unknown, the stuff that hasn't happened yet, and that's in our future. And that links to the concept of space. So we have this space-time continuum. And the material substance or matter is very much anchored in the three-dimensional known uh, area of experience, and that's where we would describe the principles of Newton. So the Newtonian paradigm, the billiard ball mechanics that explains the material world, is well understood, and that's where current medicine is effectively camped out. You know, so if you have a problem in the physical body, they're going to look for a physical solution. Now, if we can start to understand that subtle substance, which links to light, um, which could act as a template or a script for the future, this links into quantum and Einsteinian ideas where energy and light and matter are linked. And we could say that future medicine is camped out here. And the idea that it might be possible to prevent disease that's on the way in by finding problems in the light body, which is informing the physical body. So if the information that's in the field will ultimately act as a script or a template for what will show up physically. If you can fix things in the field, you know, if we can work in this area here and make a change to eliminate problems, then it doesn't have to show up at the physical level. So that's essentially the idea. So we have the concept of a divine template where light becomes form, you know, where frequency becomes form. And there's a lot of science around this now, which we'll touch on. But when we go deeper, you know, these ideas are considered in some detail. So we have a birth and we have a death, and there's a sort of a sense of evolving through life and constantly looking to be enlightened. You know, so every day that passes, we should gain experience and we should learn from it and we should become more enlightened. Um, you know, we can be born, and you know, the moment of you know saying yes to life, there's inspiration. We take the first breath, where spirit comes in, you could say, and then the moment of death, we expire. You know, expiration is the last breath. And there are many breaths in between birth and death. There are many heartbeats between birth and death. But essentially, the idea here is that there's syntropy. We're constantly evolving and spiraling upwards and looking to be syntropic in our living experience. So, with the idea that the physical body is formed out of, you could say, the cosmos, stardust, we have hydrogen and oxygen combining to create water. And then we add the carbohydrates into the mix by working with carbon and adding carbon. And then nitrogen creates the proteins. So the physical body is literally built out of stardust, but very much informed by the light body and by frequency, sound and color and light. So, if we consider that, we can also look at the idea that there are universal rhythms at work, this constant expansion and contraction, where we have, as I said earlier, the in-breath and the out-breath, the heartbeat, the respiration, the craniosacral rhythm, the circadian rhythms of what we describe as the movement of life force through the meridians. All of these biorhythms are known and understood. And, you know, the rhythms that are there um, are linked in to subtle frequencies. But we could also say that there are subtle rhythms which are more cyclic and karmic in nature. So they reside much more at the subtle level, as we've just described. And really, if you look at all the ancient texts and, as above, so below, on earth as it is in heaven, with the macrocosm, um, informing the microcosm, and the microcosm being a fractal of the macrocosm. And, this concept of holograms, where within the context of the small piece, you can see the whole. So that's why we call it holosonic sound therapy, because we're going into the hologram of the of you could say the information that's there present in the field. So if the energy field is made up of many layers, you could say the robe of many colors, the physical body, is essentially informed by the information that's in the field. So we have multiple frequencies operating in the same space, much like, you could have radio frequencies, TV, satellite, microwave, phone frequencies, all working in the same space. We have that around the body, as it relates to what's commonly called the aura. So an infinite amount of information can be accessed. If you think of radio frequencies, as soon as you tune your radio to certain frequencies, you get a particular broadcast where the information is coming through the receiver, which is the radio. And it's true that that information is there permanently, and it's only when we tune into it that we can access it. And the same is true, I think, for the information that's in the field around the body. And the simple way of explaining this is that the body is precipitated out of the blood, and it's the body fluids that carry the information that's in the field. So the body's always renewing itself and turning itself over and bringing itself into rejuvenation. And although you have cellular aging through the telomeres, we can say that the cells are looking for coherent information in terms of how to be perfect. So this epigenetic effect, the epigenome, describes what we would call the divine architect, the idea that there's a plan in the field. So much like you would, if you went to a piece of land and you were going to build a house, you would stand on the land and see the house in your mind's eye. That would be the spirit of the house, the soul of the house. And then you would sit with an architect and you would make a drawing of what you imagined. So out of the thought would come the thing with a clear plan. And the builder can then work with the plan and build the house and make it perfect for you. So this is really the idea. And, if there's a corruption on the plan, or you could say if there's a flaw in the concept, then the house won't show up as perfect. And, our body is our temple. So we could say the field that surrounds the temple should be flowing freely and be coherent. So light comes into form. It's stepped down. There's a lot of information, a lot of highly charged information and energy at the higher levels, and it just comes down into form. Now, I won't go into too much detail on this because we consider this in a bit more detail in the classroom. But the idea that we each have a destiny, a purpose, a sense of why are we here? We call that the soul note. And if the body is aligned correctly, as an osteopath, we want a level pelvis and a straight spine, much like an antenna would, if it's in the right position, be able to bring the information in correctly. We can say that if the energy field is harmoniously balanced around the body and flowing freely, and if the physical body and the rhythms of the physical body are working in a midline and in a harmonious way, then everything should be according to the plan. So the soul note is the idea that we each have a living a purpose, a mission. And some people just know exactly why they're here. They know exactly what they're here to do, and others are a little bit lost. And I would suggest that if all of this is aligned, then we can connect to the higher self much more easily, and the information can come through, and we'll end up in the right job, in the right relationship, with everything harmonious. Much like the orchestral music is made up of many members of an orchestra, all playing their own part. They each have their particular role, the first violin, and then you've got, the brass instruments, and, everything coming together to make a beautiful sound, beautiful music. but each individual has their specific parts. So the soul note describes that sense of, well, what am I here to do? And and that's a beautiful thing when you really are aligned and you know exactly what your purpose is. We'll also consider this in more detail, but we have the idea that we're pulled towards the sun, out into the solar system, and we have the pull to the center of the earth. So we have these centrifugal and centripetal forces working on us, and that is reflected in the field. And there's a sense of right and left spin in the field. This is a very, very deep topic, right and left spin. We need to pay specific attention to that, and that is considered. I mean, it's a big topic. We have to be balanced as it relates to the energetic spin that's within the field and within the chakra system. Now, for the main aspect of what we want to teach you on this little introductory online workshop, this is just really to give you an overview. This information will teach you how to clear static out of the energy field. Now, if we've got some general static in the field, it's a little bit like the dust on the top of your piano. You can just dust it off and then you can see the nice surface of the piano. So this is a little bit like housework. So we will clear the static out of the field using those two aluminium tuning forks that you saw at the beginning. And C and G, those two tuning forks, give us the harmonic fifth, which links into the sacred geometry of the Fibonacci and the golden mean, or what's also known as phi. So this is a harmonic universal constant that can be used to take the energetic static down into earth. And the videos that follow will show you how to do that technically. So the sevenfold chakra system is linked to the seven colors of the rainbow and the seven tones, the white notes on the piano. It's a very, very simple concept. And I think often if universal laws, if something is true, then it should be true universally. And that's certainly the way we teach this. It's extremely straightforward and it just basically fits the universal laws that we see around us. Seven colors, seven tones, with the idea that the upper triune, the being, if you like, the higher self, sits above the level of the heart, which is like an interdimensional junction point between the higher self and, you could say, the human material self. So the heart really acts as an interface, that interdimensional, some would call it the astral zone. And the heart actually anatomically, if you think about it, is made up physically with two atria above the midline of the heart and then two ventricles below. So the anatomy of the heart is really reflecting what's going on in the subtle anatomy, in the energy, in the light body. So we're constantly in a state of creation where we would say the impulse for an idea, like we talked about the house, you could say that there's an idea that precedes form. So the concept of Father in heaven, where there's an emissive, positive, radiant impulse for something to happen, and then that's anchored into the earthly material world, the Earth Mother acts as the anchor to the Father in heaven. So we have an idea of a positive or emissive force from the subtle and a receptive, which is negative to the positive, receptive force at the level of the earth. So this is the creative principle in action. And this is what we're working with when we work into the subtle body. We're understanding these ideas, and when they've been fully explained and explored, it will become very, very obvious that this is just a fantastic way of, at a very basic level, making sure that we can stay coherent. We're going to be talking about the primary and the secondary chakras. They're basically light centers linked to the nerve gland centers, and the joints of the body linked to the secondary chakras particularly. And this is where these light centers can hold shock and trauma. So we want to go in and make sure that there's no held shock and trauma in these various structures. And a good way to sort of get to, you could say, the starting point around whether or not you're still affected or have been affected by something significant is to finish the sentence, "I've never been the same since." And whatever that answer is for you, you'll probably know if there's something that was really big as an experience. I've never been the same since I fell down the stairs and they were concrete steps and I smashed up my back. My backache has been there ever since. Or I've never been the same since I lost my mother. I've never been the same since I had to move from my house that was my everything, and then I had to move to a different property, and I just haven't been happy since. So whatever that is, it gets us an entry point into the field because quite often that's where the stuck emotions, intellectual concepts, from a sort of a more subtle level, spiritual, factors that work through the higher levels as well they can reside there in that trauma. So at the physical level, we're looking for the health of the physical body as it relates to disturbances that might be present in the field. So if you imagine the liver, which is on the right side of the body, just under the sort of the rib cage, and if you imagine there was a disturbance in the energy field, so if the light body was disturbed as it relates to the liver specifically, you'd imagine that liver function could be compromised. So if we can identify an incoherent field, if we can identify where the field is disturbed from the point of view of the sound, and that links us into, you could say, the connection to the light of the liver. Um, and if that can be worked with and cleared, then it would make sense that the liver would then, as it looks for a connection to perfection in the light body, it would be able to work more effectively because it has a connection now to the correct information. So sometimes these things can go wrong for reasons that, are down to us and the decisions we've made. Sometimes it's emotional, sometimes it can be, there are all sorts of reasons why we might see a corruption of the coherence in the field. And sometimes it's transgenerational. We know the liver is linked to the emotion of anger. You may well have a relative, maybe a great grandfather who was an alcoholic and angry, and he then conceived your mother, and then she conceived you, and the information was in the field. So, you're carrying a kind of a DNA legacy of that story, but it's there in the field as well. And now you have a liver issue, and you might be facing hormonal dysregulation in menopause, or, an inability to detox properly, or gut dysfunction, because the liver's central to a lot of different things. So, we can go in and really be specific with making a correction, then it can have all sorts of very interesting health benefits. So what we'll teach you is how to, in this online class, we're going to teach you how to specifically work with the energy field using the harmonic fifth. But I'd just like to touch on sound baths and, using crystal bowls and gongs and all sorts of sound instruments, because sound healing has been understood for millennia. And when we go to sound baths and we lie there and we relax and we're bathed in these beautiful sounds, it's wonderful, and it can be really, really healing and a lovely experience. You get into that lovely meditative space. But what we'd like to suggest is that there's a place for specific sound therapy, which is much more directed to particular imbalances that can be found in the field. So it's a lot more. It's like literally doing surgery with sound, and that's the method that we can teach you with holosonic sound therapy. So the ancients, this is a picture that I took at Komombo in Egypt when I was in my mid-20s. You can see these tuning forks there. That's the only explanation I've got, is to say they're actually tuning forks, and the representation there is that the sound work is of help. That was, as I say, a temple of healing. So why else would they be there? Um, and these are our modern instruments. You can see on the left the C and the G. We've got the harmonic fifth working between those two aluminium tuning forks. That's what you'll be using in the demonstration that I'm going to show you um, as we sort of start the process of clearing the field. And then to the right there, you can see the steel tuning forks, which we have made specially for us, aligned to the Pythagorean principles. And that really is where we start to do the deeper work, which, if you decide that this is of interest, then as we go further, you'll learn how to do that. So if we clear the energy field, if we understand that we've got to take away the static and we just want to find the schmutz, if we can call it that, in the field, and get the physical body reconnected to the light body through the hologram of this information, um, we understand that the physical body is, the architect, the divine architect is working with divine geometry, sacred geometry. That's a graphic representation of it there, which I made up. And, we've got the seven chakras and then the seven sheaths of the auric field. That's really where a lot of the creation myths come in, because we're part of a unified field. Everything is vibration. It's about pulsation. So the physical body is cloaked in a field that links to our emotions. And then we have the intellectual level where our beliefs and you could say our programs are having their effect. And then we have the interdimensional level, which we saw earlier as the level of the heart. That gets us into the astral plane, which then moves us further out towards the idea of soul, which is the many lives construct, the idea of a spirit, and then ultimately the universal or cosmic energy. So when we look at the ancient myths around creation, we see the story of darkness, and then there's light, and then there's the logos or the word, or you could say a sound vibration, and then there's form. So we've, we've grown up with these stories of how the physical comes out of, you could say, the vibrational. So if it's true that at the point of singularity, at that cosmic level, at the top of that pyramid there, we have an infinite amount of information where the higher concentration of frequencies, at the higher vibratory levels are holding all the information, much like a stem cell, which can then divide and differentiate into a single cell of the heart, the liver, the kidney, the lung. Um, we have the concept that at the lower vibratory levels, that's where the physical realm is. And, so we have the cosmic, which is infinitely informed, and then the physical level, which is differentiated out of the one. So, we have this idea that, we've got specificity coming out of a universality, if you like. So, you and I are distinct from one another, but we are actually one ultimately. We're connected to that higher level. So, in this sort of level, at the physical level, we can look at each other and we're different and we're separate, but ultimately we're connected. So you differentiate out into the physical, and then you focalize back at a certain point back to the one. So this divinely proportioned, energetic light being, which is, the macrocosm reflecting into the microcosm, we've got the idea that, the bigger picture, whether it's cosmic, reflects the you could say the level. If we look at a microscope and we start to look at the cells of the brain, we see patterns that reflect what's there in the cosmos. I mean, it's quite beautiful. There on the left, you can see the Fibonacci, the mathematics of that, and obviously the shells of, we see creatures which have this beautiful divine sacred geometry at work, and the human body is no different. So we're all constructed around this universal constant. So we will touch on these now, just the historical and philosophical perspectives of how sound and frequency have been known about through the millennia. Pythagorean principles, harmony of the spheres, the Platonic principles of the Platonic solids, and all the philosophy and maths that went along with all of this is super interesting. And we will go into that in more detail in the class. But there are certain universal rules that are working, and everywhere where you look, you see the same rules being applied. So whether it's the platonic solids and their relationship to different frequencies, whether it's the position of the planets in our solar system in terms of the sine wave or the frequency of the collection of the matter that formed the planets, everything's dancing to a certain rhythm, a certain harmonic. And if we look at cymatics, where you have frequency going into fluid mediums, creating shapes, creating forms, you can say that the solid state is not solid and not moving. It's like constantly in flow, but it takes up a certain appearance of being materially solid. So we'll talk about cymatics. We'll go into all of those details. But just to give you a sense of why this is so important in terms of looking for, we would describe it as the highest point of leverage in terms of getting somebody better if there's a problem for them with their health or, in the body. We can say that if it's true that there is this multi-dimensional template, if it's true that from above we have a sense of a plan for what would show up at the physical level, if we have a problem at the physical level and we just try and address it at the physical level, we might not be able to fix that problem if the root cause is in, let's say, an emotion. So if the root cause is emotional and there's a blocker in the emotional level, that blocker will show up at the physical level. So you can't treat the physical body and leave the emotional aspect unattended to. Equally, if there's a belief system that might be running the background or running in the background, and that's creating emotional responses, which are then creating physical disturbances. Unless you start to reframe what's going on in that intellectual level, and this is where the tuning forks can find dissonance or lack of coherence, you won't get the physical body better because that step down, process, that template of signatures is going to be interfering with the body as it renews itself at the physical level. So if the problem's higher out and it's further out in the light body, in the interdimensional, you could say, the pathways that link to the higher self, then really we have to use methods that link into those subtle frequencies. And we'll go into this in a lot of detail in the classroom, but just know that, if you're fixing something further out in the field, it can take 8 to 12 weeks to have its full effect. So we say we let the work do the work. And quite often, if you work further out in the field and you fix stuff at that level, you don't really need to do too much. You will amplify the healing process. And whatever that person is doing with other modalities like massage, body work, treatments or remedies that they're taking, they'll work better and they'll work in a more complete way if the field is clear. So Archimedes said, give me a place to stand with a lever and I will move the world. So that highest point of leverage, we believe that when we work with sound frequencies and these holosonic sound therapeutic methods, we're really accessing a point of leverage that can bring quite remarkable results. And the 30 plus years that we've been doing this have confirmed that. So when we're working with frequencies, we're bringing in the knowledge of all the ancient greats. Hahnemann, father of homeopathy, he said the vital force is the conduit between our spirit and our body. Just think of the language here, because it's really what we're describing. Spirit is perfect at that level of, you could say, the higher self. There aren't flaws, and it can never become ill at that level. So it's seeking to express its perfection down into the physical level. So if there's an illness of some sort in the body, then, it's really because there's a block of some sort. There's an interruption in the light body. There's an incoherence which is stopping the body from knowing how to be perfect. So that block of some sort between the spirit and the body, if it can be identified and removed, then we can bring health. Paracelsus said it as well in a different way. The vital force is not enclosed in man, but radiates around him like a luminous sphere. So he's describing the aura there and the light body, and it may be made to act at a distance. So he's talking about non-locality of mind and the fact that thoughts can be transmitted across a distance. in these semi-material rays, the imagination of man may produce healthy or morbid effects. So here he's warning us that thoughts are things, and that what we might, have going on at more subtle levels can bring their problems in the physical body, which is again what we're alluding to. More recently, modern day physicists are realizing what's going on. This is um, Fritz Albert Popp, amazing man. He's saying all cells of the body emit electromagnetic waves. We're light emitters, effectively. The slowest wave travels at the speed of light, and all of the wavelengths in between can be used by the cells to communicate with each other through the mesenchyme, which is like the connecting substance, through the interstitium, we think. One could regard disease as the storage of wrong oscillations. So if we can provide correct oscillations to displace the wrong oscillations, then we can bring health. So the future of medicine is really exciting, and this is really what we want to try and get across. You're going to be entering into something that's, profoundly impactful. I mean, Mark Twain said the ancients have stolen all of our best ideas, and that's probably true. When we look back, we see that they knew this stuff. But now, vibrational medicine, as we go into the 21st century, we're a quarter of the way through now. We can say light, color, and sound will be the medicine of the future. And the new technologies that come with the signal generators that Raymond Rife were talking about, EAV, meridian testing, according to Dr. Voll, which is something I use very, very regularly and effectively. The biofield and the bioresonance machines, all of these diagnostics are very, very interesting. And then we have the concept for remedies that are carrying information, so infoceuticals, which contain the imprints and the inversions and frequencies of problematic issues that might be present. And really we alluded to the fact that, the body's precipitated out of the blood, and that the fluid body, the blood and the lymph is carrying that information. And it seems that water in its multiple states is the common denominator. The idea of structured water particularly is very, very interesting in terms of how it stores information. So really what we want to invite you to explore is the idea that we can show you an effective, simple, cheap, and duplicatable method to bring coherence into the field. And we want to teach that to the next generation coming through. We want to show this to not just the therapists who are going to charge you to come and have this work done. We can show everyone how to work in a very simple way with these simple tools. And you don't need to be medically qualified to be effective. So that's really the goal, to open this up and really start to encourage people to understand how deeply impactful this can be. So we really want to identify and remove obstacles to cure. We want the light body to be speaking to every cell of the body, because at the highest levels, where we must stay connected interdimensionally, we can say that the tendency to be well is ever present. The body's always looking to heal itself. We just have to remove the obstacles to cure. So thank you. I really hope that you've enjoyed that brief overview. The videos that follow will explain a little bit more of the concepts as it relates to clearing the field and removing static in the light body and in the chakra system. And that's really the first stepping stone into holosonic sound therapy. So if you've got access to it now, then I would suggest that you go and look at the second video, and then there's a practical video that follows, and that should give you a very, very good idea of what's possible. So thank you.